Hello, neighbor. I'm Robert Burns, and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And I don't know whether you may have a preference for written material or video, but for those of you who have a preference for video, you'll be very happy with today's feature because it will be 100% video. Now, sometime back, I told you that we would be doing an in-depth series on the practices of the Air Support Unit of Louisiana State Police, and we will be beginning that in-depth feature beginning today. And I will tell you that as I mentioned in a previous video, I had been approached by a number of sources with integral knowledge of LSP's Air Support Unit operations, and they expressed some concerns about those operations, about safety concerns, about pilots with far more hours being passed over for those who would be deemed to be in the clique of the upper brass of Louisiana State Police Air Support Unit. And that, when I say that, I would mean a gentleman by the name of Dean Laverne and or Stephen Lee. We will name names. There's no point in not doing so. And so I met with these individuals on multiple occasions, and I will say this very briefly. One of those individuals has since been contacted by an official within state police wanting to know if, now he did not name who the individual is, but wanted to know, have you been speaking with Robert Burns? And I was very pleased for him to have relayed that he most certainly had. He also relayed that it was another individual who had initially contacted me, who then gave me that individual's phone number, all of which is accurate and correct. I did call this individual, and I did meet with him on several occasions, and I got quite a bit of material from these folk collectively. And one such bit of information actually entailed a recount of what can only be described as a harrowing flight that Governor Edwards experienced in the fall of 2018. And I'm going to briefly recount what is said to have transpired in that flight. The flight was to be from Baton Rouge to Shreveport by way of Alexandria. There was a stop off in Alexandria. By all accounts, things had gone reasonably well until they were nearing the approach in Shreveport, at which time what I have been educated to be as a chip light allegedly went off, and it can either go off in yellow or red. In this particular instance, the light, if that is in fact what went off, and I've gotten versions that it was red. And red basically is an indication that you could crash at any time, and that the helicopter really needs to be brought down within the next 10 minutes, if at all possible. Whereas yellow just means it's not as severe and can be looked at your next scheduled landing. So at any rate, the red chip light went off. I will go ahead and reveal the pilot for this flight was a gentleman by the name of Eric Frazier, and he had another co-pilot that was considerably less experienced than him on the flight. Governor Edwards was on the flight. And basically they made two attempted approaches at the Shreveport Airport, and in both instances apparently Mr. Frazier, or Pilot Frazier, turned left when he should have turned right, or vice versa, whatever the case. And so and from what I've been described, and of course I'm not a pilot, and I'm sure most, if not all, of the people that I'm now speaking with. Oh, there went my sound. We'll see if we can prop it back up. The wind came. Woo! Did it ever pop up there? Sorry for that little thing. Tell you what, I'll hold on to it so we don't have that happen again, because I really appreciate this sign having been made by a dear friend's nephew. And boy, that wind is strong. And so after the second attempt, and where I know where I was at now, was talking about the conditions, and from what I'm told, these were very, very challenging conditions, such that you largely have no idea until you get aerial vision where you're flying. I mean, it's just that simple. Until you descend down from the clouds, you're kind of clueless. particularly in these model helicopters, which was the Bell 430 helicopters, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But at any rate, by the time the second landing had been attempted and didn't go well, the decision was made that we need to return this aircraft back to Alexandria. And that's what transpired. And then from Alexandria, Governor Edwards was driven to Baton Rouge. So obviously he missed the Shreveport engagement, and they deemed the safest way of getting him back to Baton Rouge would be to drive him rather than fly him in the helicopter. And I had multiple individuals tell me that this was a very harrowing experience, and I think, no doubt it was. But I'm not in a position to make judgments upon the pilot or the circumstances which he faced, so I did what I felt like was the responsible thing to do, and that was to contact the FAA and report not only that, but other things that had been reported to me, and let them take a look into the situation. And by the way, I will just throw in that Mr. Frazier did retire very, very shortly after this flight in either late September or early October. He actually retired, I believe, October the 6th of 2018. Now, those who had contacted me who didn't have the most flattering words to say about Mr. Frazier, they indicated that he retired as a result of this flight, and that had he had more experience, he could have performed better. Now, I'm just relaying that side of it because I want to move on to the fact that I did what I felt was the responsible thing, and I contacted the FAA and let them know not just of that, but of other concerns that these folk with integral knowledge of LSP's air support operations had told me about. And that particular flight involving Governor Edwards certainly did pique their interest, and so they did investigate what all transpired on that flight. And I have to be, I believe in total fairness, and so I'm going to relay just what the FAA official told me. We had probably 8 or 9 phone calls, myself and the FAA official. I could name him, but I won't. And the bottom line is he was quite complimentary of the pilot. He said that these were very problematic weather conditions for this pilot to have faced. And he said it really should not count as a mark against him that he was unable to successfully make a landing in Shreveport on a couple of attempts, given the conditions that he faced. He also said that in his opinion, it was the correct call to return that aircraft to Alexandria. He also said that based upon his investigation, he could find, and I'm pretty close to verbatim here, he could find no deviations from FAA prescribed guidelines for handling that type situation. That's one of the reasons that it's taken me so long to begin into this investigative series, because I don't like to just go off half-cocked. I told you that there were individuals who were not too complimentary of Mr. Frazier, but I owe it to also say that the FAA, they commended him. They said he did not in any way deviate from FAA guidelines or procedures based on the conditions that he had faced. They shared his sentiments of the decision to return the aircraft to Alexandria. And I think this quote is important too. He said, the bottom line is this pilot got Governor Edwards's 2 feet back on the ground safely. And he said, under these conditions, that's to be commended. This was a harrowing flight. I don't think there's any question about that. And if it was the chip light, and I'm told by multiple sources it was, however, the FAA could not confirm through the documentation of this flight that it was in fact the chip light that had gone off. And I guess nobody may ever be able to substantiate that. But at any rate, the ones who contacted me expressed concern for the fact that Governor Edwards was flying for probably about 60 minutes, if not 80 minutes, with that red chip light on. And you're from every, I mean, you can Google it. From everything, its indications are anytime that chip light is red, you are subject to crashing. It's why they say you need to bring the aircraft down within the next 10 minutes if at all possible. Now, the FAA official did tell me that, just trying to initiate a landing on the fly is not an easy deal. And so that's why he said, in his opinion, it was the correct move to return that aircraft back to Alexandria. So I was told that Governor Edwards' office was not pleased about this whole situation, and that they were going to launch their own investigation. Now, I don't have any way of confirming this other than I will tell you that I made public records request of Governor Edwards' office for any flight that he was on from early September through October 6th. And I can just tell you that if they had these concerns, they did not reduce them to writing in the form of emails or text or anything of that nature. I guess, understandably, any governor commits to a lot of functions, and it probably was frustrating and inconvenient to try to explain why he was not able to attend the Shreveport function, especially probably being able to give no more notice than they could. But at any rate, I don't know whether the governor's office was irate or anything of that nature. I've been told they were, but I don't have any way to substantiate it. And also that they had indicated they would back off their own investigation of what happened once Eric Frazier opted to retire. But I want to again reiterate that the FAA official commended Pilot Frazier and said that he in no way deviated from FAA guidelines and procedures for handling what he encountered. I was also told that by the FAA official that these type weather conditions, they wouldn't even pose a challenge for pilots in the northern part of the United States. In fact, he made the comment they could just pop some popcorn, kick back, and say, "Hey, we're having a good time here." You know, no challenge at all. He said, but it's very different down here. That whatever those weather conditions were, they are extremely infrequent, and no pilot down here has any extensive experience in a helicopter of trying to deal with the conditions that Mr. Frazier had to deal with on that day. The analogy that the FAA official made to me so that we could understand it in layman's terms, he said it is much like trying to balance a broomstick on the palm of your hand. He said that's the type challenge that Mr. Frazier faced on that day, and for that reason, the FAA official was complimentary of Mr. Frazier's performance. I will say this, the FAA delved further into LSP's operations. He told me that LSP Air Support has just hired a brand new mechanic, and he said this gentleman is top-notch. He's an outstanding mechanic. He also told me that, and I guess it would be the hangar, he said when he went out there to visit to look at LSP's air support operations, that things were, and I'm quoting him, far better organized than they were the prior time that he had been out there. He also indicated, and that's the title of our feature for today, that he does not know whether it was as a result of this particular flight that was so harrowing for Governor Edwards, but Louisiana State Police Air Support Unit has amended its policy, and they will no longer go up in these Bell 430 helicopters when the weather conditions are what they were on that day of the flight of Governor Edwards. And the FAA official told me that he felt like that was a very wise move. As I understand it, these Bell 430 helicopters are considerably older. Their technology is not what would be the case in more modern helicopters, and it would be advisable not to put these pilots under that type of situation, because it's just the Bell 430s are not an ideal aircraft for handling those type policies. Now, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this particular episode, but I want to stress, and we're gonna give a video beneath this video, a very short clip. Back in October of 2018, I want to emphasize that's when this happened, okay? That is when this flight happened. And you have to realize the individuals who contacted me expressed concern about pilots with far more hours who post for promotions being denied. Remember, I told you that at the beginning of the video. Well, we're going to show you another video. Well, you've seen it before, but I'm going to emphasize just these key points. Here this is. This happened. Now, it apparently, Mr. Frazier, it may not be that he didn't have sufficient hours, because the FAA was complimentary of him. However, I will say this. The FAA official told me that, he said, if in fact that is happening, that pilots with more hours are being passed over for pilots with far fewer hours for these promotions. This is, and I quote, he said, that is a, quote, horrible practice, unquote, okay? And he said, having said that, we have absolutely no jurisdiction to go in there and tell Louisiana State Police that you need to hire this pilot over that pilot. He said it's a horrible practice. I'm quoting him, okay? I don't think, now bear in mind, that's what he said. It's a horrible practice. We're going to leave you with that video beneath this one in which Mark Morrison, if that's accurate, if it's a horrible practice, then I can only assume that Mark Morrison is making a fool of himself in this video in making the analogy between flying hours and number of accidents that you would write up as a regular trooper. In fact, I've been told that's an incompatible comparison. Now, from what I'm told, once you've gotten about 1,200 hours, you've probably encountered most situations you're going to encounter, and you're probably going to be a pretty darn good pilot. The problem is, according to my sources, and we've made public records requests to substantiate this, you're having pilots with far fewer hours than that. And Morrison's own words, he said they only get about 150 hours a year, so it's going to take them quite a while to stack up these hours. The folk that contacted me basically indicated it, said, hey, these guys don't want to earn their stripes, okay? They want to use connections, and that's so commonplace in Louisiana job opportunities. Oh, he's well connected with the upper brass. Michael Satcher was one of the ones supposedly well connected and ends up in Louisiana State Police's Air Support Unit. I don't have to tell you what a fiasco that turned out to be, and that's not the only fiasco. You know, but we'll cover that in subsequent features. I don't want to cover I don't want to extend this one beyond the scope of Governor Edwards' harrowing flight, but we are, in a subsequent feature, going to be delving into this business of promoting pilots with fewer flight hours. We'll be delving into some other matters like the fixed wing multi-engine certifications when LSP has no such aircraft. Made a lot of public records requests. I am being fought 10 different ways from Sunday on one particular public records request, and the runaround is not even the right word, okay? And I'm not sure I'm going to handle the situation, but that'll probably be the third, maybe the fourth episode. But we're going to wrap this one up in stating that, you know, while there may, or quite likely is, validity to the fact that some lives may be being placed in jeopardy from less experienced pilots flying, in this specific instance, going by what the FAA said, Eric Frazier should not be the scapegoat or the one hung out to dry on this flight. And I believe in fair reporting, and that's why it's taken so long. I'm going to give you a printout of the FAA email to me once this thing was formally closed. I just got it yesterday. But as I said, we probably spent a good 5 hours on the phone between the 8 or 9 phone calls that we had. And he did indicate that they will probably be dropping in on Louisiana State Police air support operations with a little bit more frequency. And the whole goal of this is to help ensure that no one meets a tragic death due to any practices of the Louisiana State Police air support unit. And, you know, anybody who knows me knows that I differ with Governor Edwards on a number of policy issues, and that's just a fact. But I can tell you one thing: I would never want anything to happen to him or to any other official, be it a legislator or whomever state police is flying out. My differences with Governor Edwards are strictly philosophical, based on policy. I have absolutely no animosity whatsoever toward the man as an individual, and I think he is probably I know he is a high quality individual on a personal level, and I think I won't elaborate. Everybody knows the situation with his child, and they made a decision to go forward and honor the life. I think he is a good man, and I would never want anything harm to come to him or any part of his family. And the folk that contacted me said they could not live with themselves if something did, and they had said nothing. And that's the reason I contacted the FAA. I'm not in a position to go in and try to ascertain whether state police's air support units are a little bit renegade and half-cocked. I've been led to believe they are, but I did all I can do. And we're gonna have. I want to emphasize, this is just this feature. We're gonna have some other features about this business of hiring pilots or promoting pilots with fewer flight hours. And I want you to remember, and I'll reinforce it as we do that, the FAA said that is a, quote, horrible practice, unquote. We'll have the video of Mark Morrison right beneath here. That was in October of 2018, right after this incident. And we'll pick it back up with installment 2. I will say this: our next installment, our next feature is going to be Calvin Braxton. Okay, I'm making that statement public because I've had to work on this, and it's dragged, and I will let everyone know. You know, we've reported about Calvin Braxton on numerous times, but it's been a while, and this thing is so convoluted that it's the ultimate example of trying to drink water from a fire hydrant. And so what I did, or what I am doing, and I'm about 60 or 70% finished with it, is I'm putting together a feature that will not take an extraordinary amount of time to invest, but it will enable anyone who's never even heard the name Calvin Braxton to get up to speed. Because believe it or not, we have had a substantial increase in our subscribership since our last feature on Calvin Braxton, for which we are extremely grateful. I think you've seen some good features from Sound Off Louisiana that have justified more interest in our blog. But for that reason, there are plenty of people who are in no way familiar with Calvin Braxton. In fact, I can tell you there's one major media source who doesn't have a clue what all has happened with Calvin Braxton. So I'm going to do my best to get that to where you can get up to speed. That too will be a multi-part feature, just like this air support unit is. But the first phase that I hope to have out by the middle of next week, I hope, this is Saturday, February the 27th. I sure hope to have it out by the middle of the week. I've been working on it for quite some time, a number of hours invested in it already. And that both the Calvin Braxton series and this LSP Air Support series are right now #1 on my radar. I want to thank everyone for the features. And let me just close out with this. You know, they have the phrase lagniappe. Earlier today, Jim Mustian, an Associated Press reporter, published a feature. We're going to give you a link for it. We're just going to consider this lagniappe With regard to the Ronald Green matter, I was asked to do a public records request some time back about whether or not Corey York had been disciplined on that matter. It came back that he had not. That has now changed. It turns out that Colonel Reeves in his last week recommended that Corey York did state that Corey York should be placed on 50 hours, suspended for 50 hours. That apparently was implemented toward the latter part of December. And current Colonel Lamar Davis indicated that he was honoring Reeves's deal. He may have to, I don't know. But he did state that if it had been him making the decision, he certainly would not have been that lenient. So we're just going to let that be a lagniappe feature to today's feature. I'm not going to do a separate headline on it because right now I am deeply entrenched into this air support and Calvin Braxton matters. So thank you once again for your dedicated subscribing, your reading, your watching. We appreciate it very much, and we're very appreciative of our increase, both in our subscribership to the blog and to the subscription to the YouTube videos that elaborate on this blog. So once again, this is Robert Burns. I hope everyone is out enjoying this nice warm weather. It's certainly quite a contrast from what we had last week. Like I said, for those of you who prefer video over reading, I would hope you would be pleased because you had no reading to do for this feature. Thank you once again. We look forward to bringing you the Calvin Braxton initial feature in about 3, maybe 4 days. Thank you once again.